Hare Krishna. So today we're having part 13 of our the Bhagavad Gita section of our Bhakti Shastri course. This is going to consist of a kind of a review and a little bit of a reflection on the first 6 chapters. Because the Bhagavad Gita is considered to have 3 sections of 6 chapters. There's 18 total chapters. And the first section, 1 through 6, largely describes what we've been calling the yoga ladder, and also describes Arjuna's initial dilemma and sets up the teachings that Krishna gives him. And so I wanted to take a look at, and because that yoga ladder takes us right to the point of bhakti. So we saw last week that the last verse of chapter 6 makes that transition to bhakti. And starting next week, we're going to begin chapter 7. We're going to talk exclusively about bhakti. Bhakti is the real topic of Bhagavad Gita. But as we saw previously, Prabhupada has that interesting purport where he says that in order to understand bhakti minutely, it's good for us to understand these other yogas in the yoga ladder. It starts out with Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of analysis, and it moves on to Karma Yoga. There's kind of a little, Krishna also calls it Buddhi Yoga, and then moves to Jnana Yoga, and then to Dhyana, or meditational yoga. And so somebody who goes through all those different processes, then they have an opportunity after that to move on to bhakti. According to chapter 7, it's not going to be everyone that does that, but they're put in that position where they have some likelihood of doing it. So this is a chapter 1 through 6 review and a little reflection. And so we'll start out with Arjuna's dilemma. That they were lined up on the battlefield for the battle of Kurukshetra, and his relatives were on the other side. It was Prabhupada says, a fratricidal war. It was a war of succession between 2 sides of the same family. So he had relatives and many, many dear ones on the other side. And so it opens with a discussion, a debate, really, between Krishna and Arjuna, and deciding whether or not Arjuna should take part in the battle. And Arjuna says he shouldn't. We read how Krishna draws him out in the chariot. Arjuna asks, he wants to see these guys on the other side. He's amazed that something like this could happen. That here these people who are so closely related and so closely connected are actually going to come to blows over succession. And he thinks it's madness, and he wants to see them, look them in the eye. And Krishna puts him right in front of those who are the most dear to him. And Arjuna says becomes overwhelmed with compassion when he just can't believe that something this terrible is going to happen. And it just blows his whole mind. He has a tremendous, even physical reaction. He says he starts to shake, and he's dropping his bow. He wants to run away. So everything's spinning around. It's such strong emotions that it has tremendous physical effects upon him, and he just doesn't want to do it. And he tells him, he tells Krishna, he says that anything that he would gain from the battle would be outweighed by the grief that he would feel at the loss of those dear to him. Because generally people do things, undertake events or any kind of enterprise because they want what's going to happen, the result of that activity. They think it's going to produce something good. The other side was thinking they want the throne. And if they get it, it'll be worth killing all of their relatives. They'll be happy. Now Arjuna says even if he wins, he's going to be miserable. He has no motivation. And he says beyond that, he thinks it'll be sinful for him to do it. He thinks this is a mistake. That he has his teacher Dronacharya who taught him how to be a warrior, and his grandfather Bhishma Dev. They're on the other side, and he says they're worthy of my worship rather than my attack. He says I should be worshiping them with flowers instead of shooting arrows at them. Is what he says. And he says I'm going to be, not only be unhappy, but I'll have sins on my head. And then he points out, he says that when the whole all the elders are killed, if we have this huge cataclysm here, and all the senior members of the dynasty are obliterated, and also the younger people see that they were acting inappropriately, that everything is going to break down for the future of that dynasty. The young people aren't going to behave, and the whole place is going to go into ruin. He says even the generally it says that the people will offer things to the departed forefathers, so they'll stop that. So the present generation is going to be obliterated. The future generation is going to be scarred and won't have the guidance, and actually will have this example of bad behavior to follow, so that they're not going to turn out very well. And even the departed ancestors, because of the state of the younger people not making the proper offerings to them, they're going to suffer, fall down from their place in Pitralok, where the departed ancestors live. So he said it's going to be just a terrible, catastrophe for everybody, and it's going to be partially on my head. So he says, it's going to be sinful. I'm going to be unhappy if I win, and I'm going to be burdened by all these sinful reactions. So he said, I shouldn't do that. And then Krishna, when he first responds, the first thing that Krishna says is he tells Arjuna, he says, your refusal to fight is an act of weakness. And it says, and you're acting like somebody who's a non-Aryan. And Prabhupada says, an Aryan is someone who knows the value of life, somebody who understands, especially something spiritual. So he says, you're acting like someone who's ignorant, and you're going to have ill fortune, and your reputation is going to be ruined. So he tells him, you're being emotional and foolish. And you're doing the right thing. You're following your dharma. And this exact same argument he gives in greater detail in 231 and 237. And he explicitly says it's your dharma, it's your duty, religious duty to fight. And actually not to fight will produce sins. And he says it'll be painful for you because people won't say that you've done a noble thing by departing the battlefield. They'll say that you were a coward. He looked at us, he was afraid and ran away. So he says, not only will you, so you'll get sin instead of avoiding it, right? Because it's your dharma, and it'll be very painful because your people will accuse you falsely. You're thinking you're doing some noble deed, but because you're contradicting dharma, it's not noble. And so they'll conclude you simply were a coward and not a great warrior. And that helps a little bit for Arjuna, but not completely. He still has a terrible time dealing with killing his especially his grandfather and his teacher. He simply can't, and he again just says, no, I simply cannot fight. I can't do it. And so then Krishna has to take the discussion to a little bit higher level. And this is what really introduces the main topic of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna tells Arjuna that actually his whole reasoning process is based upon the failure to understand both his own true nature and the real goal of life. That's really what he tells him. He says you're speaking all these, you're speaking like a learned person, but you're not acting like one. He says a learned person laments for neither the living nor the dead. So the reason you're doing this, and then he launches upon his exposition on the soul. He says, you and everybody else, and he, are permanent, and the things of the world are not. He divides the world into two things. There are things which are permanent, and things which are impermanent. And you and me and everybody else, as souls, are permanent, and everything else here in this world is not. And if you don't understand that, then you have a distorted perspective on things, and you can't understand what's important and what's not. says, you're thinking that all your relatives are going to die, but actually they've always existed and they will always exist. You're worried about the particular forms and circumstances that they're in right now and that you're in right now. And those are going to change. They can't live forever. You can't live forever. Your situation as their relatives can't stay forever. You'll be born again. And who knows who your friends and relatives will be then? Who knows who your friends and relatives were last life? You can't remember that. So he says that we are permanent and the things of the world are not. Therefore, he advises Arjuna that he should have nothing to do with the things of this world, meaning that shouldn't be his objective. That where he sees value, that should be he should see value in liberation, something permanent. He says you need to go beyond this world. Your objective, your goal of life, your purpose, your focus, everything should be aimed towards transcendence. He calls it at first deathlessness. Amrit, the situation where there's no death. We know here in this world there's always death. But he says none of the things here are worthy of being your goal in your existence. And so then, but because Arjuna is still particularly bewildered by his compassion, Krishna he opens his discussion by talking in detail about the soul. It's also the perfect, as things would have it. Krishna is very slick. The introductory topic for transcendence. The transcendence and something eternal have no meaning unless something about us is eternal, unless we are eternal. So he describes how we are. So he talks all about the soul. It's called, and this happens to be the first rung of the yoga ladder that we're going to talk about here, Sankhya Yoga. It's the basis for our taking up the process of trying to transcend. Right? If you talk to many people on the street, and you tell them that you're eternal or they're eternal, and you're aiming at liberation, this world is temporary and therefore not of any lasting value. They'll think that they might think that you're not very intelligent. That this is all there is. So why isn't it? If this is all there is, it must be important. Get as much out of it while you can. And that's what you should do. Renunciation is a silly thing. So Krishna is going to explain, though, why it's not. And it's called Sankhya. Sankhya means analysis. And Prabhupada says, he defines it in the purport of 229. It says, according to the Nirukti, or the Vedic dictionary, Sankhya means that which describes things in detail, and Sankhya refers to that philosophy which describes the real nature of the soul. And then there's a little break, and he says, an analytical study of the soul and the body has been very graphically explained by Lord Krishna, and this descriptive knowledge of the soul and the body from different angles of vision has been described here as Sankhya in terms of the Nirukti dictionary. So that's what Krishna does. He gives an analysis. And he says, the soul is eternal, which means it has no beginning. There was no time when it didn't exist. There's no time when it appeared. Nor does it have an end. So it's eternal on both sides. It's existing now, always has existed, always will exist. And he says, but the body and the rest of the things in this world are temporary. The words he uses are sat and asat. It can mean existent or non-existent, or true or untrue. Different types of senses have it. Here Prabhupada just says, it's eternal or not eternal. And Krishna says the soul is unchangeable and therefore unaffected by anything material. And he really helps Arjuna by emphasizing that none of the weapons that are going to be used on the battlefield have any effect on the soul whatsoever. Even if the people are violently killed, whatever it may be, even to the however catastrophic the injuries and however powerful the weapon, doesn't touch the soul, affects only the body. Soul is untouched. It says it's unchangeable. So he tries to give Arjuna some reassurance there. You're going to be using deadly weapons and trying to kill them, but actually you're only going to kill their bodies. Since the soul and body have no permanent relationship with one another, death is compared to the changing of clothing. So we, on a regular basis, we change our clothes. And it's not a big deal, because the soul, the clothes are extraneous. They're not part of our intrinsic nature. We can change our clothes, and we're just the same as we were before. No, I mean, we may have some kind of favorite clothes, and when they wear out, we may feel a little separation from them. But that's not important. But generally, we change clothes without any remorse or regret or trauma. We don't feel that anything intrinsic about ourselves has changed. And so Krishna compares it like that. And he was helping Arjuna in that case because both of his teacher and his grandfather were both old. And so in that case, the clothes were old, the body was old, and to get fresh ones could be a good thing for them. He was giving them that hint. And then he says the soul neither kills or is killed. In the battle, bodies simply kill bodies. And this kind of gives Arjuna, there's two things that happen here. First, it gives Arjuna some emotional distance between himself and the unpleasant actions he will undertake. And it also introduces an important element of what's going to come later in Karma Yoga. The notion that the soul is not a sole actor. That we think we're doing everything, but actually the body is acting, and that's not acting completely under our own power. It's there's the material energy, or Krishna says the three modes of nature, or the higher powers in the universe that help the material energy function. And so in many ways, when we act, the equipment that we have, the body that we have, reacts to our desire, but it doesn't act under our power. It's there are now people have these prosthetic limbs that with a little interface with their brain, they can think it to move in certain ways, but it has its own power to move. So it's a sophisticated machine that picks up on their desire. Whereas otherwise, if we have an actual limb, we feel like we're it's the power of our own body that's moving it. So I think that's us. Well, even in that case, we're saying, Bhagavad Gita is saying, that the body is a sophisticated machine that picks up on our desires, and then other forces actually cause it to act in the way we desire. And that's going to be an important. It's important both for Arjuna, where he can feel that, he's not fully participating in that action. He's made a decision to do it, but it's really only the externals. He and his relatives are not fully and directly involved. It's really just the bodies his body are killing their bodies, or it could be vice versa, depending on how things would go. Now, Prabhupada also points out that Krishna's analysis does not support a nihilistic idea that one is free to act in any way whatsoever. Like we said, the souls are eternal, and the bodies and everything else here is temporary, and therefore without intrinsic value. Then we say, well, we can do whatever we like, without any consequences or any regret or shame, or can't be condemned for it. But we see that Krishna advises Arjuna to act according to his dharma, and warns of negative consequences should he do otherwise. So Krishna doesn't support that. A notion that because the soul is the ultimate important thing and the body and the other things are not, that one should act whimsically. And we'll see from the rest of these first chapters, Krishna is going to recommend that Arjuna continue to act, but in a certain way. And that activity that he does is going to help to bring him to the point of understanding himself as a soul. So a proper action undertaken with proper understanding is essential for self-realization. Actually, if we think that things have no meaning and we act in any which way, then actually, in that sense, we're taking external things to be more real than they are, more important than they are. Why do we want to act whimsically and do everything? Maybe do harm to others and such things. Where does that desire come from? So Krishna will teach Arjuna how, if he acts in a certain way and with a certain understanding, that the acting in the material world with the material body actually produces self-realization, where other types of action actually make it harder to understand the truths that Krishna has told him, or it would be more and more difficult to understand yourself as a soul, to realize that. And this is what Prabhupada says, though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged. But at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. So, Prabhupada supports that notion. People can take it like that. Certain nihilism, well, it means nothing's important. But self-realization is, and right now you don't realize yourself as a soul. And that's the real value. The soul might be the real value, but you can't understand yourself properly that way. So in order to take advantage of that real value, we have to act in certain ways. And then also, Krishna gives what we can understand right now of the soul, of ourselves as a soul. It's ourselves. When we went through the chapter, I tried to because we say the soul sounds like something apart from us, but it's us. That's who we are. But we don't understand our own true identity. We're thinking all the things that we think we are generally not what we are. We think we're our thoughts, we think our bodies, the history of activities with our bodies. But we're not. Who are we? What are we? Well, Krishna explained we're the soul. Well, who can we perceive of that? We see the illustrations in Bhagavad Gita of the little tiny point of light that travels from one body to another. That's what we are, but we can't perceive that. What can we perceive of ourselves as a soul? And Prabhupada explains it here in his 220, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text 20 in his purport. He says, the soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart, where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky, owing to clouds or for some other reason. But the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is therefore daytime. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether men or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. So what we can understand of ourselves is our ability to be is our consciousness, our ability to experience. That's us. The experiences are something quite different. And we'll see later on, I'm going to quote from the 5th chapter, which will really kind of highlight that experience. of what it means just to be the experiencer. We're experiencing things. We're not the experience. But we generally, we do this even in obvious ways. If we read a book or a novel or we watch a movie or a TV show, we get into it. Or of course, we had the, or if you have, some kind of serious sports competition, people have their teams. And oh my God, they live and die by the result of that game that takes place. Well, not physically, they would say they live and die by that. And it has nothing to do with them. They're not even playing. But they identify with that. That's their team. And it matters. They're going to be wonderfully happy or they're going to just be miserable, depending on the outcome of that. So we do the same thing. We take the things that are part of our experience and we say, that's me. And therefore we invest emotionally and mentally and all the different ways we can invest in that, even though it's not us, we're the experiencer. And Krishna is going to teach how we can understand more about ourselves and at least understand that in a very practical way. So after explaining to Arjuna that Sankhya philosophy, he tells him, I think it's text 39, he says, now I'm going to explain to you Buddhi Yoga. Because, it's not enough just to hear about it. I've just told you you're an eternal, changeless, actually blissful soul. And I've just spoken it, and I may not understand so well, and you may not understand so well just by hearing that. It may be intriguing. But has it changed your whole experience? Has it changed mine? That's debatable. So buddhi, Prabhupada usually translates it as intelligence. It can be thought of as understanding or discernment as well. And so at the beginning of the karma yoga rung of the ladder, usually we say that we have that the main rungs of the yoga ladder are going to be karma yoga, jnana yoga, and dhyana yoga, and then the next step being bhakti, or the meditation yoga. But there's at first Krishna gives us Sankhya yoga, and then there's Buddhi yoga. There's a phase at the beginning of karma yoga. At the beginning of the karma yoga rung of the yoga ladder, one resolves, based on what was learned from Sankhya, to dedicate oneself to the pursuit of self-realization and transcendence to the exclusion of any worldly goals. And Krishna talks about this in 241 through 244. It's this vyavasa atmaka buddhi, this firm resolve that now I've understood the situation, that I'm an eternal soul, and everything else, my current position in the world, my current body and my family, everything about my existence right now, other than that, is temporary. I can't keep, my family alive eternally. At least their bodies will pass away, mine will pass away. I'll be separated from them one way or the other. But and I didn't realize that I'm eternal. I'm an eternal being. And so what I should be working towards is not the forgetfulness of that and trying to reinforce a misconception, but I should be trying to reverse the misconception that I'm just what I see, feel, hear, touch, taste, and smell. But rather the experiencer of all those things. And I should be trying to understand that. And instead of having to go through continuing births and deaths, let me attain, as Krishna was asking, the deathlessness. He says this takes a firm resolution, and one has to make that a clear, singular priority. Krishna says that people who also want to have worldly goals, they cannot have either the kind of focus or the firm resolve. Their resolve has many branches. Their intelligence has many branches. They can't keep focused. So at the beginning of this of what he's going to call karma yoga is this place where Arjuna is supposed to take what he's learned, and he's supposed to see what really is valuable and what's not, and make a clear choice. Because in order to be successful, there has to be a certain amount of, extreme amount of focus on this. This has to be my one and only real goal. Somehow everything else has to fit into that purpose. It has to be the overarching purpose of my life. That's what it takes. Otherwise, there's distraction. What we're trying to do is to remove the distraction. Right now, we're into the experiences to the level that we forget that we're there experiencing. And the whole process of the yoga ladder is going to try to reverse that, so that our attention gets freed from the experiences, and we come to ourselves and say, hey, whoa, look, I forgot I was even here. You can be, absorbed in watching something in a movie, or people watching on the edge of their seats for some kind of sporting contest, or be immersed in a novel or something, or video games, and then almost forget that they're there. That's what we're doing. We have this very immersive experience that we're subject to, and because we're so focused on the experience, we're forgetting that we're there experiencing, and so that we're trying to reverse that. So if we have so many other goals within the experience, that tends to work counter to that effort to try to pull our attention back, to recapture our attention and to come to ourselves. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so then then there's the Buddha yoga is just taking it as kind of the preliminary step of karma yoga, and that karma yoga is going to be the yoga that's discussed the most in these first 6 chapters. And there's certain ingredients that we're going to talk about here in karma yoga. And Krishna tells this about Arjuna right away. He says you have to be tolerant in the face of happiness and distress, or attachment and aversion, and really in all of their various forms. So he tells Arjuna right off the bat, in order for you to do the right thing, you might have to tolerate something that makes you unhappy. It doesn't mean he's going to be happy to see his friends and relatives killed, or be happy to kill them, because you have to tolerate that. And you may think that by leaving the battle and not participating, that will make you happy. So you have to reject the happiness you imagine by failing to do your duty, and you have to accept the unhappiness that may result. And even though it may feel uncomfortable and it may be unpleasant, you have to tolerate that. And Krishna tells him something interesting. He says that these feelings of happiness and distress, they're actually external to you. He says they're coming through the senses. He says it's the contact of the senses with their objects, matra sparshas. So our ability to see something either beautiful or unpleasant, touch, all these things. So this is coming actually from it's part of the experience. It's not part of the experiencer. So he says actually it's not part of your intrinsic nature. He gives him a hint there. But he says, first of all, you have to tolerate. So if we simply act in accordance with what feels good and avoid what doesn't, we can't even exist by doing that. Actually, we have to look before we cross the street. It might be a nuisance, but it helps not to get run over that way. There are many things. Children put everything that they get a hold of in their mouths, and they have to learn not to do that in order to avoid trouble. We have medical treatment. Many times the medical treatment is not pleasant, but we go through it in order to regain health. So that we have to do to some degree, always. But it's our tendency to want to do what's pleasant and avoid what's not. It's just that's deeply ingrained in everybody. And so Krishna is saying that you have to learn, you have to do the right thing, and even if it's painful, and even if something else might be more pleasant, and tolerance. And there's so many different forms of this happiness and distress. So sometimes he calls it attachment and aversion, something that's attractive, something that's repulsive. He says victory or defeat, loss or gain, fame and infamy. There's many different ways that we experience pleasure or displeasure, unhappiness, pleasure and pain. Many things that we're attracted to or things that we're repulsed by. But he says all those different things, we have to tolerate them in the face of your duty. That's the beginning of this karma. It's going to come to a point, he says, where these things won't matter very much to you at all. At first, it's maybe still very difficult. It's not going to be pleasant for Arjuna to do it, but he's got to do it. Later on, when he has more progress, he won't take these things so seriously. He'll simply see his duty. So strict adherence to dharma, despite difficulties in the performance or the unpleasant results. So Krishna says there are certain things that are, that are the right things to do. That's given by the scriptures, dharma, and so you follow that, and not act whimsically. And he said, you do that. That's important for you. He tells him, it'll be very bad for you if you don't do that. And regardless of what the result is, or regardless of how difficult it may be, it says dharma should be adhered to despite temptations to do something else. So Arjuna thinks, it might be so much better if I just leave the battlefield. And that dharma should be performed only for self-realization and liberation. Generally, excuse me, dharma has a reward to it. The dharma says that when you follow dharma, the promise is that you will get good karma and you will minimize your bad karma. And so that somebody who gives up their freedom and follows the rules given in the scriptures can enjoy a better future than they would otherwise. Because every action has a reaction. So that's usually what's given. People are motivated by that. Yes, do I want to enjoy more than I am now? Yes. Do I want to have less suffering? Yes, I would like that. So you do it this way. Sometimes you may not like what you have to do, but do it and it'll be better in the long run. But Krishna is saying none of that. Why? Because all of these things that are supposed to be obtained, all the good karma and the bad karma, are part of the temporary world. They're not intrinsic parts of you. They're not eternally connected to you. And by focusing on them, right, you're distracting you. Your attention is being taken out into the experiences, and you're forgetting yourself as an experiencer. So he said the only purpose the only purpose in that dharma is for self-realization and liberation. And that's what's going to happen there. And then it's mentioned that Krishna says you should be atmavan. which means that Prabhupada translates it as established in the self. And my comment is, knowing that the nature of the soul, the yogi understands that happiness and distress are extraneous to their real selves. So Krishna has told us that we are the experiencer. That's the reality of it. We're into the experience, we're identifying with it. It's causing us pleasure and pain, happiness and distress, so many different things. But it's not a real part of us. And how can we see that? By more and more trying to understand ourselves as the experiencer. So Krishna says, established in the self. So you should be meditating on that. We should be meditating upon that. What it means to be a soul. It's not just that there's a little blop of dot of light in me that will survive my existence and will be inside my next body or something. But that we're that. Our very capacity to have experiences, that's what we are. And so he's telling Arjuna to become more aware of that. And if he does what he's supposed to do otherwise, he's doing these other things that Krishna's listing, that will help him to do that. It will lessen the external distractions, and then they begin to wake up and say, oh, wow, that's who I am. So he says, he tells Arjuna to be Atmavan, to be more and more be aware of himself as the experiencer. And then, as Krishna mentioned to Arjuna, he says that the only bodies are killing bodies. The soul is not the real doer of things, not the only one. That the physical actions are done by the external energy. So the soul is not the only doer. The soul has a decision-making capacity and does not actually earn the results. Krishna tells Arjuna that you have a right to perform your dharma, but you don't have a right to the material results, that good karma that's supposed to happen. Why? Because you can't do it on your own. You can only desire to do it, and the body functions as a very sophisticated machine, picks up on your desire, and the external forces of the world make it happen. And that's important, because if we think we're doing things independently, that reinforces the concept that here this physical body of mine is me. And if I feel that I'm doing it on my own, then I feel I deserve the results of my activities. And so I focus on them. Where does my attention go? Into my body, into my status, into my mind. And pretty soon there's nothing left for me to remember that I'm me anymore. So that's an important thing. That the soul has a decision-making capacity, but is not independently able to make physical things take place. So therefore, we don't deserve the results of our activities, and we're not the only doers of them. We want to take credit, and we want the results. That's natural. Krishna is saying, don't think that way. That's helping you to persist in your forgetfulness of your real self. Then there's a few more ingredients. There's the control of the mind and the senses. We should be thinking, they say you should be thinking in terms of your goal in life. Engage your mind and your senses in the proper activities that help you to realize yourself as a soul, to do your karma yoga. And then Krishna in chapter 3 gives a whole section on sacrifice. Sacrifice done for the sake of Vishnu or the Lord. Yajna artat. done for the sake of Yajna or Vishnu. And he says, of course, that even persons not on the process of self-realization need to do that in order to not commit so many sinful activities. That we are existing because of the blessings and benedictions and work of higher beings, the devatas, who provide us with everything we need. We need air and water and food and light and the earth and so many other things, even our bodies. We need those things. And so if we don't show some gratitude for that, then we have the status of thieves and are punishable. But for someone involved in self-realization, it's also important, because it said these are done for the Lord. So Krishna will show us that a little bhakti is important in success on the yoga ladder. So the bhakti is not only the ultimate goal of those on the yoga ladder, but it needs to have a little bit of bhakti within it in order for it to succeed. And what we're going to hear about in the next chapters is that bhakti doesn't require anything else. It's completely self-sufficient. And then in chapter 3, he says that you should surrender your works. And in chapter 5, the results of your works to him. Again, a little bit of a hint of bhakti. And also that we should fix the mind or the consciousness on Krishna. He says, you fix your consciousness on me. That helps to purify the mind. So he gives these instructions to Arjuna. So little elements of bhakti here. And then it says, as karma yoga progresses, there becomes a greater realization of ourselves as a soul. Actually, it becomes, now it's very theoretical. We hear about it, we can try to think about it, we can, but as one's practice continues of karma yoga, the distraction of the experiences are lessening, and therefore there is some spare attention with which to recognize our own selves, and that begins to happen. And what that does is it deepens and steadies the elements of karma yoga. Things are not as much of a, and then it transitions, it's called then jnana yoga. As that transition happens, as the greater realization is there, as the practitioner begins to really experience themselves as a soul, as the observer, and not actually being within the observations at all. All the things that, so there's not tolerance as much anymore as it says they become more and more the same. Now it's a tolerance because we're hyper attuned to everything. There's even the it can be physical pain. Think, how can we deal with that? But a lot of that is just due to hyperattention. People say, I think there's the current theory of what hypochondria is that people who are hypochondriacs don't imagine things, but they're hypersensitive. So something small that's happening that somebody else might not pay any attention to, they take as very serious. And that focus causes them to feel it more acutely than somebody else would. And sometimes, we're sick and somebody comes and cheers us up and distracts us. All the same information is being sent to the brain that we're not feeling very well, but we're distracted and we don't feel it so much. So something like that happens as we feel the happiness, the completeness and the wholeness of being a spirit soul. And instead of being so attentive to the sensory stimuli, we're not paying so much attention, and it doesn't have as much effect. And so it becomes less toleration, and just you don't worry about it so much. It doesn't become a very strong consideration. At first, it's, oh, this is really terrible. I have to tolerate it. I have to try to have the strength to do it. Whereas later on, it won't be as big a deal. You'll realize that you were previously a hypochondriac. That's what's supposed to happen. And then it says that a real transformation begins to take place in persons that are successful in this way. So they begin to feel this inner happiness. So Prabhupada calls it the higher taste. The words are param drishtva, or the experience of the supreme, or the something higher. And that person that says that they no longer have so many desires. They feel whole. We have so many desires, and how can you stop them? But they feel so whole that they don't have them anymore. And then there's this beautiful verse here. It says, this is chapter 5, 8, and 9. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. She are the observers, simply observing. So we feel that when we see, hear, touch, smell, eat, move about, sleep, and breathe, we feel that we're doing something. But somebody who's beginning more and more deeply to realize themselves as the soul, the experiencer, just sees that they're still... We go to sleep at night, and the world changes. We have all these dreams, we go even to deeper sleep. And even then we have we said when you wake up, I really was sleeping. There's some consciousness there. But we were there. Just as like the channel changed. It wasn't like we went someplace, the channel just changed. The experiencer was just there, so they feel like they're doing nothing at all. That's a sign of realization of us as the soul, as the experiencer. It says, then the Jnana Yogi focuses more intently on sacrifice. And in the 4th chapter, they talked about how they acquire deeper knowledge. And they not only perform sacrifice, but they have this particular understanding that we talked about. And it's there in text 424, that all the elements of the sacrifice are either directly or indirectly Brahman. Yeah, he says they realize themselves as Brahman, as transcendent, and all of the other things, even the material ingredients, are coming from this one source. And so it says when sacrifice is done, they gave the example in the Gita was like a fire sacrifice. So the ladle with the ghee, the ghee itself, the action of pouring the ghee into the fire, the person who's making the offering. Is there anything else? I don't know. All those things were Brahman, transcendental. And when those activities are done with that understanding, it says it leads one towards realization of the absolute and transcendence. So they do that. They practice a particular, and they list all these different types of sacrifices that different people perform. They begin to take a real interest and put a focus on that. And they also take up the guidance of a spiritual master. This is there in 435. No, before that, from 435 it describes the knowledge that they get from performing the sacrifice with the proper attitude and taking the guidance of a spiritual master. And this is, having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. So now they see the world completely differently now. So it's not just that they see themselves apart from the world, that they're the experiences, but then they see all the other beings are also souls, and they're part of the Supreme Soul, and that they belong to Krishna. They see a connectiveness there. Now, when Jnana Yoga, says from the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Jnana Yoga, Krishna has stressed that Arjuna should continue to act in the world. There are a couple different places that Arjuna was saying, well, now I don't have to fight, right? If the soul is the most important thing, and why should I, act on the physical platform and do these terrible things? If I'm supposed to be renounced all worldly things, why should I participate in the battle? He challenged Krishna in chapter 3 and chapter 5. And say, look, what intelligence is, just intelligence is better than acting on the physical platform. But although the soul has no real connection with the material world, conditioned souls cannot realize this fact simply through being informed of it. Through the process of karma yoga, the realization develops. Giving up activity prematurely simply interferes with the process of self-realization. This is what Arjuna told him. Somebody can stop acting, but they still have all these material desires. Krishna also argued that one should continue to act even though one is on the platform of realization to set an example for other people. So, you don't want to encourage other people just to give up everything when they don't have the power to do so. You want to encourage them to act in a way that will help them spiritually. He also considered the action taken in knowledge in no way as a hindrance to self-realization. You don't have to worry about it, so this isn't going to hurt your self-realization. It will help you if you're not mature in your jnana. And even if you are, you can continue to act. But with the right attitude, it's not going to hurt you at all. It was mentioned in the second chapter that the stitya pragyas, those with profound knowledge, can withdraw their senses from their objects, but they can also act without attachment and aversion. No difference. So he says, don't think it's going to hurt you to have to do this. It'll help others and it won't hurt you. And then the acharyas we were consulting, Baladeva Jabushan, I think particularly, and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, indicate that continuing to act in karma yoga, even at the stage of jnana yoga, helps to stabilize the jnana, which can be threatened by the powerful restlessness of the mind. So one can cease acting externally, be very renounced, and simply be conscious of oneself as the soul. If one's in an advanced stage. But even then the mind may disturb them. It may not be very, very stable. So Krishna in chapter 5 was saying, even if you have this transcendental knowledge, continue to act. That's the safer way to go. But once the Jnana Yogis reach a very mature stage where they're very, very stable, it's acceptable for them to give up their activities and start the process of meditation. So it says someone who's not so qualified in yoga, action was the means, this karma yoga was the means. And then it says for somebody who is mature, at a very advanced level, the giving up of activities is the means. Now you're going to sit and you're going to meditate. This is dhyana yoga. We covered this in chapter 6. So during the process of meditation, the yogi draws all attention away from external things, including the mind, which, although we experience it as inside the body, is external to the soul, and focuses all attention on the supersoul. So this we can't even imagine trying that, but that's what happens. Is now, through this long practice, they're less absorbed and attracted by the world of experiences, and it's time then to turn that within. And then they can actually focus on the form of the Lord in the heart. Right now we're too distracted, we can't do it. And they are forced to contend with and ultimately control their minds. That becomes the mind is that was why Krishna was saying it was better to, Krishna and the acharyas were saying it's better to act even in a high level of jnana, because the mind is such a distracting force. It really feels like us. It's much easier for us to understand ourselves as not bodies, Because we dream, we do things, like that. And we see our body changes, but the mind is always there, It's like, seems like it's me. So in that process of meditation, they finally get a really powerful grip on the mind. And it becomes a real powerful opposing force that they have to overcome. It's easier when the mind has some engagement and activity. They experience a powerful higher taste, because now they're not even just experiencing themselves as soul, but they're seeing the super soul, they're seeing the form of Krishna. It says that makes them unshakable in their practice and determination. They said they feel like there's nothing better than that they could want or desire. And it says at that time, their deep realizations stay with them even when they are not in meditations. And that's described in chapter 6. We looked at them last time. Thus the self, this is 628 through 31, thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. 629, the true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. 630, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. And 631, such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Supersoul, knowing that I and the Supersoul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. So they have this powerful transformation. I guess the last time, once you've seen the Supersoul, you can't unsee him. It transforms their whole reality in those ways. We mentioned that the main reason that we wanted to look at the yoga ladder was because Prabhupada hinted that we could understand Bhakti Yoga minutely by understanding what happens in the yoga ladder. Prabhupada doesn't talk; he talks a little bit about it in his purports, but mostly he focuses on Bhakti applications for the various verses. Because Bhakti is going to be the ultimate thing we take up from Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada was translating Bhagavad Gita and commenting on Bhagavad Gita with a purpose to bring people to the ultimate goal. And he didn't want to distract people from that. And once we understand the ultimate goal, that we will tend also to see those verses with a Bhakti application. So he really focuses on bhakti, 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 even in the first 6 chapters. But he gives us that hint that we can understand bhakti in a minute way. He says minutely if we do understand those other yogas. So I thought that since people who are taking this course generally are already bhaktas, that we could safely look at the yoga ladder and hopefully gain a little bit of insight from it. To use in our bhakti, okay? And so a lot of the things we can see the parallels, and some of them are pretty obvious, and so we might think not so important. Just like Krishna told Arjuna that he has to have this vyavasatmaka buddhi, he has to have a firm resolve to exclusively pursue self-realization and transcendence. We need that. It's called shraddha, or faith. We really have to see that, Prabhupada tells us right from the beginning, we're not the bodies, we're spirit souls, eternal servants of Krishna, and that we should try to serve him and go back to Godhead. He tells us very simply. So this, in the same way, we have to have that faith and make a resolution that that's our goal in life. That I'm not who I think I am. I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. I'm not part of this world, and I belong with Krishna. So I have to resolve to exclusively pursue self-realization and transcendence. We have a little clearer idea of what that looks like than Arjuna did right there at the Karma Yoga level. And we also have Dharma. Our Dharma is that we're eternal servants of the Lord. Dharma means our essential quality. And so our Dharma is to please Krishna. And we do it by following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. We don't do it whimsically either. There are ways that Krishna is served, those who know him well, and know what pleases him. And so we follow in the tradition that directs us how to be able to do that. If we have a strong desire to serve Krishna, then also we will do like Arjuna does, we'll tolerate difficulties and distractions. So a strong service attitude will help us to persist in spite of difficulties or attractive distractions. Although here's an opportunity for some pleasure, but I've got this service. If I have a strong desire to serve, then I'll do that. I'll forego the pleasant opportunity and do the service that I need to do. Even if the service is difficult, I'll try to do it. Try to be tolerant, as Krishna told Arjuna. And if our goal is to please Krishna, then we are not motivated by a material, selfish objective. And Krishna is not a material thing. And so we simply want his pleasure. So like Arjuna is not doing his dharma for some karma, some pleasurable material thing that will result for that. We also, if we're serving for Krishna's pleasure, then we're fulfilling that requirement that the yoga ladder does. We're doing those things that the yoga ladder is doing. We're thinking of ourselves as transcendent beings. We're making it we're looking for something eternal instead of something temporary. We're trying to tolerate happiness and distress and those kinds of type of dualities, and we're tolerating them when we have to, and we're not looking for some other happy thing or pleasant thing from within the realm of our present experience and within this material world as the reason why we're serving. So again, that sets all those same conditions for helping us to realize ourselves as souls. And like the meditational yogi, the advanced practitioners of bhakti remember Krishna all the time. We may not sit and meditate, although we have kind of the closest analog we have is we chant japa. But even and if we do that and focus very firmly on the mantra, which is Krishna himself, that can also transform us and help us to remember him the rest of the day. And of course we have service that should help us remember. So we're trying to control the mind also, like the meditation yogis do, and remember Krishna. That's what they're doing. They were trying to focus their attention on the super soul. We're trying to put our attention on Bhagavad, the original form of Krishna. So those things are fairly straightforward. We talked about them before, and we might think we didn't get so much new out of it. But the yoga ladder didn't show us a whole lot more than we probably knew already. But I was thinking that there was something that occurred to me that I think may be the minute thing that really helps us by studying the yoga ladder. And what I see in the yoga ladder that may not have the emphasis it deserves in bhakti is the focus on the realization of ourselves as souls. We saw through the yoga ladder that as karma yoga moves to jnana yoga, to dhyana yoga, there's a real experience that the practitioners are getting of really experiencing themselves as souls. It's no longer, Prabhupada says it's not just theoretical, it's practical. That their life experience changes, and it changes everything about them. It says when they have that, they have this profound sense of inner happiness. When something bad happens, they don't even think something. They don't even go, "Oh, that's terrible." Even in their minds, they don't reject it. They think, "Oh, that's just my karma." When something really wonderful happens, they think, "Oh, that's just my karma." They don't get all excited. And it says they don't have any desires. This is repeated a few times. No desires that come from the mind. They don't feel the incompleteness that we feel. That's why we have desires. We don't feel complete. We feel certain emptiness. This is the power of kama. They've overcome kama, which we found in the 3rd chapter is such a powerful enemy. And understanding ourselves as souls was one of the main remedies for that. So my argument and my conception is that the minute part of bhakti that we may get from looking at the yoga ladder is this emphasis on being able to understand, experience ourselves as soul. And I think if we pay too little attention to that, which I think we do, that is like one of the main causes of stagnation in our bhakti and the ability to break through the level of unsteady bhakti. And there's an interesting, I was reading just the other day, this is in the Narada Bhakti Sutra. Prabhupada began this and wrote some purports to the early verses, and it was eventually completed by Satsvarupa Maharaj. But this particular purport is Prabhupada's, because it's from the first verse of the Narada Bhakti Sutra. And he says these interesting things. And he speaks like this in other places occasionally. This is a theme that kind of pops up now and again. And he says, the strict followers of the Karma Kanda portions of the Vedas perform various sacrifice for worship of different demigods in order to achieve particular material results. Out of many millions of such worshippers, some may actually engage in the process of understanding the Supreme, the Absolute Truth. They are called Gyanis. Perfection for a Gyani lies in attaining the stage of Brahmabhuta, and he quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 4:30-20, or self-realization. Only after realizing themselves as a soul. Only after self-realization, having the experience of themselves as a soul. Only after self-realization is attained does the stage of understanding devotional service begin. The conclusion is that one can begin the process of devotional service, or bhakti, when one is actually self-realized. One who is in the bodily concept of existence cannot understand the process of devotional service. It is for this reason that the Narada Bhakti Sutra begins, now, therefore, I shall try to explain the process of devotional service. The word therefore indicates that this process of devotional service is for the self-realized soul, one who is already liberated. Similarly, the Vedanta Sutra begins, Tato Brahma Jigyasa. The word Brahma Jigyasa refers to inquiry into the supreme absolute truth, and it is recommended for those who have been elevated from the lower stage of addiction to the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas to the position of interest in the Jnana Kanda portion. And then Prabhupada says, only when a person is perfectly situated in the realization that he is not the body, but a spirit soul, can he begin the process of bhakti, or devotional service. So first of all, it's pretty frightening to hear that one has to be perfectly situated in the realization he is not the body but the spirit soul, to begin the process of bhakti or devotions. Well, we saw that Prabhupada engaged everybody in the practice of devotional service. So I take it to mean that to become advanced in spirit in devotional service, that this perfect realization, and realization means experience, not just understanding, but an experience that one is not the body but the spirit soul is required. And that if we don't have that, it's blocking our progress. And at least in my experience in devotional service, I don't think we make that a real emphasis. We think, oh, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, I serve, I try to do so many things. And many of us, I don't think, gain that experience of ourselves as a soul, and we don't make it a focus to do so. It's like, that's kind of the initial, information we get. You're not the body. And Prabhupada kept repeating it time after time, and sometimes we think, Prabhupada always says that. He always focuses on that one thing. Why can't he talk about something higher? And it wasn't, I think, not just because he was talking with lots of new people all the time, but he was trying to remind us, try to get us to come to that platform. Because we saw from the yoga letter how it transforms people's reality. When we actually can understand ourselves as the experiencer. And we can experience that wholeness. We're supposed to learn how to serve in love and act unselfishly. That's hard to do when you feel incomplete, when you have so many desires, when you feel miserable. Krishna said you have to understand that you're a spirit. So if you want to overcome kama, that's what makes us feel incomplete and unhappy. We're supposed to be steady in devotional service. So one of the things that happens, that causes us to be unsteady, one of the symptoms of unsteady devotional service is that we want puja and pratishta. We want to be somebody, even in our spiritual society. We want some kind of recognition. Prabhupada used to say, what did he say? He said, profit, adoration, and distinction. These are indications that we don't feel complete. We're supposed to be tolerant, more tolerant than a tree, and more humbler than the blade of grass, and give respect and not want respect. That's another description of what it means to be steady in devotionals. Can we do that if we feel incomplete, if we have so many desires, if we still think, that I'm a physical being? Then I worry about my position in the society. Am I recognized? Am I appreciated? All these things come about, and we have access to lots of high level material. We understand what's happening in the spiritual world. We can pick up Krishna book and see what's happening in the spiritual world, and we understand something of even. Deep spiritual emotions. But how can we access even, minor spiritual emotions consistently if we're distracted by the external experiences and not seeing ourselves as the experiencer? So the unsteady position doesn't mean that we don't experience some higher taste. It doesn't mean that we don't experience some real devotion, but it's not steady. Doesn't mean that there aren't times when we just want to please Krishna. We've all had experiences where we think, this is the only thing I ever want to do. I just want to please Krishna. I don't want anything else. But it doesn't always last. We remember those moments, or those times, or sometimes it's a period of time, but it doesn't always last. So I think if there's something we can take of importance from the yoga ladder, right, if we want to analyze bhakti minutely and see the thing that may be missing, that can really help us, I think is the focus on trying to have actual experience, actual realization of ourselves as spirits. Yogeshwara Prabhu has this kind of beautiful little thing he wrote, trying to show the significance of being a soul. And I think, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. I'd like to share that with you, and because I really like this. Where did I have it? Okay, I think I have it in here. I think I should have got this out earlier, but I didn't. Okay, here we go. Okay, Yogeshwara Prabhu, he says, the question Prabhupada poses is, for you today, what wisdom can help you to achieve a meaningful life? And Yogeshwara Prabhu says, the answer he gives has three parts. You are not the body, but an eternal, beautiful, powerful spirit. Because you are indestructible spirit, life's traumas do not define you. I thought that was really eloquent, because he mentions that they don't define you. Doesn't mean we don't have them, but there's some place in us, the real us, that's not touched by anything. It's whole and complete. And he says beautiful and powerful. As an immortal spirit, you are capable of more than you know. And I was thinking about this further, and I was thinking of a couple of other things. That when you're completely whole, you have the capacity for real love. The difference between desire or kama or lust and love is that ability to be concerned about the other. the more that you're concerned about yourself, the more it's lust. The more that being in contact with someone else is pleasing you and making, removing all your distress and making you happy, that's lust. The more that your connection is about making the other individual happy, like, of course, ultimately Krishna, we want, then it's love. Love means concern about the other. And there's a whole series of gradations. When you're whole, it's much easier to love than when you feel like you're incomplete. So if we're spirits, complete, full, powerful, beautiful, eternal, undamaged spirits, all the things that have seemingly hurt us don't really reach that deep. They don't reach all the way down. Then we have the capacity for real love. We're trying to learn how to love Krishna. If we can't love, how can we do it? And the other thing that happens, when, as I was thinking the reverse side of that, sometimes when people are really damaged, we have so many people in this age of Kali are traumatized, even at very young ages, that they may think that they've been mistreated because they're not worthy of love. That may be indication to them. Psychologically, that happens when you're very young, in particular. So we're, as spirits, we're capable of love and we deserve love. So that's my suggestion, that when I'm looking at reviewing the yoga letter, I kept seeing this preoccupation with coming to the level not just of understanding Sankhya, but this realization of ourselves as souls. And I think that's something that may be a little lacking in many of our practices, and that may be one of the things that really, really holds us back in making advancement in devotional service. And so that was my suggestion. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll start next week on on chapter 7. We're going to start the section that's exclusively on bhakti. We've climbed up the yoga ladder, and we're going to take the next step to the top of the ladder, and learn how to worship Krishna directly. And so it's going to be fascinating and right up our alley as devotees to do that. And looking forward to starting that next week. So, Hare Krishna, thank you very much.